Hello everyone, and welcome to this video. Today I'm talking about another topic that I feel like is really important to know when you're first starting to go into this designing world, is knowing the difference between a JPEG, a PNG, and a CMYK and RGB. These things are super important when you're first starting, and one of the reasons is if you want to, for example, you have a photo or a logo that you want to export into, for example, a header, or you want to get your logo on a t-shirt. What are some things that you need to know before you start doing this? Now, one of the things that I want to talk about first is CMYK, because a lot of logos are designed in CMYK instead of RGB. And one of the reasons that is super important is when you export it. CMYK colors are mudded. They're a little bit less bright. They can be bright if you use, for example, a Pantone color. Then, of course, the colors can be bright, but usually they're not. They're usually very muted, very soft, not very strong. They're a bit muddy. And that's because CMYK is contacted of cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. And K stands for black as key. So you have to keep that in mind when you're designing something. Key is some color that I would advise you to use almost none of it, because it makes the artwork super muddy and basically very ugly if you use too much black of it. Although black is a very common used color, but because when you're first designing a logo, the best way to start and see if the logo is working is test it in black and white. Do not use gradients when you're first starting out. Don't go crazy with gradients because when you're designing a logo, gradients are going to be the biggest pain in the designer or printer's ass, especially when you want to print it into, like, for example, you want to turn it into something, huge, or you want to make it something like that can be for print. Then you have a big issue because you cannot do that. Now, there is another thing you have to keep in mind, and that's 300 dpi. 300 dpi is used for print. If you want to print something, you want to use a printer from like big design companies, usually the highest thing you have to take is 300 dpi. Every single website that you go to that has a printing shop will tell you about the requirements for the print. Now, a lot of people who go to these websites just press, and print, and that's it. They forget to check the requirements for printing. Do that the next time you design something and send it to a printer, because if the colors are off, or something else, or the size looks ugly, or it's pixelated, you probably messed something up there. You probably did something that didn't really belong there. And that's why I'm discussing this, because I feel like it is super duper important for you guys to know this when you're designing something. Now, there's also the other one that's RGB, which is technically for screens. For example, I have a monitor next to me, I have my computer, I have both of them, and I have my phone, which is also a screen. Now, screens use 72 to 94 dpi, sometimes 150, depends on the screen size or if it is accepted. Sometimes it could be accepted in that size. And one of the things you have to keep in mind, if it's an RGB, that it's always going to look different when you print it on a CMYK printer, because the colors could be, for example, I have my trusty little, I guess I could say, call this my RGB white little remote, and what it does, I can show you the color difference. So this is my little light, and I'm going to turn it on, and I'm going to switch it to red. You can barely see it, but this is the red, this is green, and this is blue. Now, if we do CMYK, it's going to look like this, and this. And then, of course, you got black. Black is not included into a light. But that's something you always have to keep in mind, that the colors are different. There's a different way of making the colors. And for that example, I have included an image into the video, which you'll see on the screen right now. And that tells you also the difference between the different printing and coloring. And that's something that you always have to keep in mind. Now, there's also another thing, and that is JPEG or PNG. PNG is usually used when you want to export something into that has a transparent background. For example, when you design a logo you want to put onto your top of video, or you want to print it as a logo to put on something else, like for example for your stream, it's always important to keep in mind that you have a PNG logo that's going to have a transparent background. If you export as a JPEG, it's going to have a white background. Is that going to look pretty? I guess not. It's going to look pretty ugly. When it comes to a thing like art, like JPEGs and stuff, JPEGs are usually used for photos and stuff. So if, for example, you have a photo that you've made or taken and it's in a JPEG format, that's usually when you're doing that kind of stuff. So always go keep that in mind when you're designing something and you take a photo of something. It's probably in a JPEG format, which is a compressed format, which means that everything is compressed into one photo, and that's it. It's usually, you can do it, and it's usually recommended for a lot of things, but sometimes I would say prefer to use a TIFF, which is another type of file, which usually for gigantic photos you'll use a TIFF. But for example, for a JPEG, you can usually use that for like small photos, something. For banners and stuff, like for your stream something, or for Twitter or something, JPEGs and PNGs are both recommended. You can use both in that case. And that's something that I keep in mind. For example, if you want to create like a flashing image, like we did if you watched it, or you haven't watched it, that's okay. In case you haven't, this is the video that we talk about the creating your own header in Photoshop that's animated. It will usually either be a GIF. Now, a GIF is an image, or some people call it a GIF, or GIF. I call it a GIF. Some people say GIF, which is basically an image that is for an animation. It can have frames, because that is basically what the F stands for. It stands for frames. And keep that also in mind. So when you're like exporting something for that's animated, always put it into a GIF, or use it as a MOV. MOV stands for movie, or an MP4, which is also a movie, which is compressed. Keep that in mind when you're designing something, because those things in terms are really important when you're doing something that is for design work. And I hope that this video has told you something about the RGB world, the CMYK world that I'm in every single day. Does it have to be printed? Yes, okay, 300 dpi. Does it have to be on the web or just on the internet? Okay, 150 or 96 dpi. Also, dpi stands for dots per inches. Keep that in mind. Because that is super duper important, which means the little dots that you see, if you print something in 72 dpi, print something in 300 dpi, on big gigantic printers, you'll see the difference. And maybe I'll include a photo of how that looks right here, or maybe I'll have it included somewhere else in the video. We'll see about that. And I hope that this video was informative and that you learned something from it. I certainly did. I certainly learned some lessons from it. When explaining this to you guys, I hope it was informative. I hope you guys have learned something from it, and I hope that in the next video that we're recording, we'll touch on even more of it. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.